Today's example is to give you a demonstration of using Java Swing with a program that uses a model, so uses an object, and it adjusts a JComponent or a drawing along with it. So I've started this program to save us some time today. I have a JPanel and a JFrame already created. I already have the frame, excuse me, I already have the panel added to the frame, and I have all those components already set up. The move panel, I have my mouse on the wrong screen. There we go. The movement panel's already been, for the most part, created. This program is going to create a, hold on, I gotta figure out where it's at. There we go. This program is going to create a little canvas where we're going to have a circle that's drawn on that canvas, and whenever we click move the circle, it's going to move the circle along in that canvas. And when I change color, it's going to change the color of that circle that's in the canvas. So it will just move it around and change the color, and it will give you an idea of how to pass things over to a JComponent and update the drawing. It'll show you how to use a class. I already have a circle class created that holds the X and the Y value of where the circle starts for the canvas. It holds the diameter, so how wide or how wide the circle is, and it also holds a color. And that color object will change the color based on a random color that's been created. So I'm going to create a canvas up here in the top part of our interface, and that'll bump those buttons down to the bottom. But before we do that, let's drop over into the circle class so I can just show you what I've got inside of here. I have all my private instance variables for my X and my Y and my diameter, and as well as my color. The X and the Y are not quite what we would think when we're talking about Java Swing. And I brought up this section in your textbook. It's section 10.4.2. This shows you how to draw an oval using Java Swing. And you can see the draw oval method takes 4 parameters, an X and a Y value, and that gives you the starting top left corner for the height of the invisible box that will be drawn. So it will give you a starting point, which is this X and Y value right up here at the top, and then we give it a width and a height. And Java Swing will draw an oval inside of that invisible box, and that's how wide and high and where our values are for our oval. So what we will end up is generating new X and Y values, and that will move the coordinates so that that invisible box is moved around on different parts of our screen. And then our height and our width is actually just going to stay the same initially. If we have time at the end, we're going to adjust that too, so that we can draw that oval. And then of course we can change color too. So we have 2 kinds of methods whenever we're working with graphics. We have draw and we have fill. And a draw method, D-R-A-W, is going to draw an outside oval or an outside border of whatever component that we're drawing. Now a fill oval or a fill rectangle or a fill polygon, that will fill the components on the inside that has been drawn to the color that we set to be the color to draw or to fill that oval with. So much like whenever you are painting an actual picture or an actual watercolor, you dip the paintbrush into the color before you draw or before you fill. It's the same idea with Java Swing, in that whenever we get ready to draw an oval or fill an oval or fill a shape of any kind, we have to tell it what color to make that object before we start drawing it. And that's what will make it draw in different colors. So again, section 10.4.2 will show you how to draw ovals. This right up here in 10.4.1 will show you how to draw rectangles and fill rectangles. And there are some other ones too. If you go out there and search for the Java Swing components, you can see all the different things that you can draw. So my color, or my circle class, excuse me, is going to hold that X and the Y value for the top part of the canvas. The diameter, we're going to translate that into like the height and the width, and then the color object. Now the color is a class itself. So it is from the AWT class. You can see it imported it up here. And right now, whenever I create a circle, I have just set the default color to be black, which is actually the default color in Java whenever you're drawing or filling an object in Java Swing. I've also just went ahead and set the diameter to be 100 initially. I have getters and setters down here, and I have a couple specialized methods that I want to point out to you. I've created a method that changes the starting location for the X and the Y for the canvas to move. This is what will make it look like our circle is bouncing around the screen. I've also created a method that changes the color. So I just take a random value between 0 and 255, and that each of those different values in the red, the green, and the blue will generate a new color. So once I have that new color generated in this section, I just set that as the color. And then I also have one more method down here that just finds a random, or changes to a random diameter. So it will adjust how big and how small our circles are. And I've just chosen between 1 and 100 for this value, so that we don't get something bigger than the screen, and and also so that it doesn't end up being 0. Even at that, while I was messing around with this morning, I ended up with a bunch of 1s, and I had a hard time telling where it was on my screen versus what was just a dirty spot on my screen. So maybe 1 might even be too small in this regard, but you can always go in there and change. So this is the class that does the work, the business logic for our circle. So it sets the location, it changes the color, and it sets the diameter. So all different pieces to create our circle. Now over here in our movement panel, you saw that whenever I launched the program, I have 3 buttons on here. I have one that moves the circle, changes the color, or it changes both. My listeners, here they are. My buttons are created up here. I put the text on them. I went ahead and I stubbed out all of my listener classes. So here's my one for moving the circle, changing the color, and changing both. So I went ahead and implemented those inner classes. I've added the methods. All we have to do is just type in there. As for my panel itself, I've already created instances of the listeners. I've added those to the buttons, and then I finally have added the buttons to the panel. So hopefully we can just focus on getting our circle to update and to draw. Now let's take a moment and let's create our circle so that we can add that to the panel and we can make sure that we see it. Many ways that you can create this. One of my favorite ways is to let Eclipse do the work for you. So I usually will just create an instance of it. I'm going to call this circle drawing, and I am going to spell out these so that you have a good clue as to what's going on. New circle drawing. And this is what is going to actually draw my circles. Now, I don't have a class in my project called circle drawing yet. I need to create that. Create class circle drawing. I'm going to keep it in my view because it is a view component. Fills in the name for me automatically. Here we go. Now anything that is going to have a drawing on it or use a graphic extends the JComponent class. So I'm going to have the circle drawing treated as a JComponent. Once I do that, I have to add in an import. And in order to get items to draw, I have to use a very special method. And I wish it would just import for us automatically, but it doesn't. It is a public void method. It is called paint component. That's one component. And it takes in a graphics parameter. To import my graphic, oops, from the AWT, there we go. Now, this method, again, is extremely important. I was messing around with this morning, and I had paint components in here, and I could not figure out why it wasn't working. I looked at it so many times, finally went away, came back, and I saw the S there. And as soon as I removed that S, it allowed the graphic to start drawing. So that method is very important. It has to be public. Its return type is void, so it doesn't return anything. And it is called paint component, takes in a graphics parameter. And that graphics parameter G is what allows us to draw on the canvas. Now, right now, I don't have anything on here, so let's just do a fill oval real quick so you can see what that looks like. Spelling matters. We'll put it at 0, 0, actually. And let me auto-complete this for you so you can see. There it is, what we're trying to fill in here. We have an X and a Y, so that's where that canvas begins, a width and a height. So just so that we're getting something on here, let's put some values in there. Now, right now, I have an instance of this circle drawing on my movement panel, but I have not, inside my movement panel class, but I have not added the drawing to my panel. Now, when you're adding JComponents to a panel, you have to specify the preferred size. So one of the first things that you'll do whenever you add anything that is a JComponent, extensive JComponent, is you have to set the preferred size to a new dimension. There we go. And the new dimension will have a height and a width as well. So we'll just give it a canvas of 300 by 300 for this circle drawing. So it's kind of like cutting out a piece of paper and sticking it on there, and then everything has to go inside of that 300 by 300 area that's on that panel. Now, after I add that preferred size to that drawing, I can add that drawing to my panel. And because I've put it right here up at the top of my movement panel, I should see it up here at the top, and then my buttons will be down below. So let me run that really quick. So here's our panel, here's our black button. Here is our 300 by 300 area, is probably something like this. And then here's where that 0, 0 is. It extends over 100 and down 100 to draw our circle. So if I adjust this, and let's say that I have it move over 50, and you can see how that I will adjust on our screen. So it bumped it over 50, still kept it up here at the top, and it's still 100 by 100. So just by adjusting those those X and Y values, that is what will move our component, our circle, our oval, here it is, down 100 over 50. There we go. So that will control how we can move our component. Now, I don't want these values in here. What I want are values from my circle object that I create. So let's first create an instance of this new circle. And instead of using the manual X and Y values and the diameter that I've put in here, let's use the one from the class. So I can use my getters, my get X, my get Y, and my get diameter to get the values to use for my circle. Now it should look a lot like it did initially, because by default I have used the default no arg constructor for the circle, and that means that it uses the values in our default no arg. So our diameter is on 100, the color is set to black, and then I didn't declare or I didn't initialize X and Y, so it uses the default value, which is 0. There we go. Okay, so let's get some new. Let's get the color set first. Or no, excuse me, the color set in the class. We don't have to set the color. Actually, yes, I do want to show you how to do that, because we hadn't talked about that. We can set the color to be any kind of color that we can create. We can use RGB values to put in there for a new color, or we can use some of the built-in colors that are provided in the AWT class. You can, by typing color dot, there are default colors built in there. So there's black and cyan and gray, and you can scroll through them all, find most of the colors that you want. So this is how you set specific colors as well without having to use the RGB values. Instead of setting it to a new color, we're going to use the color from the circle class to set the color. So now whenever I run this and launch it, here it is. Move the circle doesn't do anything, change the color doesn't do anything, move and change doesn't do anything either. So let's implement those so that they do something. So in my movement panel, after this, let's do the color first. After the change color button is clicked, we want it to change the color on the graphic. So let's call our circle drawing class, and let's say change the color for our graphic. We don't have this method inside of here yet, so let's implement it. Create a method inside of our circle drawing class. I've obviously done something to turn off my red X's on the side here, which is a little frustrating. So whenever that change the color button is pressed, what I needed to do is to go out to that circle class and to generate a new color to use. And then that new color will set the color component for the class, and then I just need to redraw the picture with the new color. So in it, I will say C dot change the color. Well, the method names happen to be the same. That is completely by chance. There was no reason for that. Let's call this change the color of the circle, so that way they're not the same. I'll change that over here too. Now they're not the same method names. Like I said, that was not my intention. So now after I call this method, change the color, it goes out to the class, calls the method, changes the color, generates new RGB values, sets the new color for this object. Now I need to redraw this object. So there is a method called repaint. And anytime that you make changes to values or colors, it needs to be repainted. So repaint will go up here and call the paint component methods with the new values put inside of it. So it will, upon initial load, it will load the defaults, which will be black, and it'll be 0, 0, 100 for the diameter. Now, whenever I click change the color, it's going to generate a new color in the class. And I'm going to tell the paint component to repaint. So it'll go back up here. It will set the color, and this time it will get the new color from the class and set it to whatever that new color is, and then fill the oval with the dimensions that we've already provided. So if I launch this now, I should see a change of the color. So it's adjusting, it's changing those new values every time, and then it's repainting them to make those new colors show up. Pretty neat. So let's do the same thing inside of our move the circle. So in our circle drawing class, in our move circle listener, let's call our circle drawing class and create a new method to move the circle. So let's call it move the circle, and then I call it the same method as the other one. Oh, the other one I call change the location. Perfect. So we'll say move the circle. And let's implement that method inside of circle drawing. And now, whenever we're ready to move the circle, we're going to go out to that circle class and say change the location. So that's going to run that change location method, and that change location gets us new X values and new Y values and assigns that to it. After we have those new values inside of our object, now we're ready to tell it to repaint what is inside of our paint components. I'll launch this. We'll check to make sure it's working. Okay, so our change color is still working, and our move the circle, now you can see it hopping around because we're getting new X and Y values each time through. One thing you can do if you're interested is you could use inside of your circle drawing. Oh, I want to move, not inside of change the color, but I wanted to, you could sys out those values of X and Y so that you could see how they're changing each time. Obviously, your user wouldn't see this, but it could be a way for you to see what is going on as the values are changing. And sometimes that's convenient because you may think that certain values are going in there, but maybe they're too high or they're too low. And then I'll just put a line too so you can see the inside of the console. So it's not here on our initial start, because our initial start just calls that paint component method. But now whenever I click move the circle, it's moved the circle down. You can see my X value is 41, so it's moved it over 41, and it's moved it down 269. Move the circle again, there's my new values. It's down 16 over 93. So X is way over this time to 284, but only down 2 on the Y. So that's one way that you can kind of troubleshoot and see what's going on with your component to see if the right values are going inside of it. And then you could do the same thing with color. Well, let's implement the move and change color. So in this one, we can actually, I already have my change button listener out here, we can easily just call both of those methods to get us a new value. So circle drawing, change the color of the circle, and then circle drawing, what is it, change, move, it's move, right? Move the circle. So now it'll, whenever we click that change on both buttons, it will pop over here, and first it will call change the color and repaint, and then it will call move the circle and repaint as well. Now the interesting thing is this will actually happen once and it will repaint, and then this will happen again and repaint, but it will be so quickly to us that we won't be able to spot the difference. It will happen so quickly. So here's move the circle, still back, change it, move it, change it, and then here's both, move and change. So you can see how it's calling both of those methods. Right now it's so, looks like it's off the screen. There it is. So there's move and change the color. We could also implement one more inside of our circle drawing to adjust the width of the circle too. So maybe whenever we call change both, it also changes the width of the circle too. We have a method inside of my circle class that does this. So C dot change the diameter, and then I have to repaint again. So I'm just going to have this happen, changing the width, whenever we say change both. Okay, so moving still works, changing the color. Now whenever we do both, you can see how it's changing the size. Oh, really small. Oh, bigger. Here we go. How it's changing getting a random width for our diameter and changing that. So the main component of working with drawings is you have to have the drawing itself extend JComponent. You have to have this method in here that paints the initial components, and more often than not you will use variables for the values to fill them or to set them. One other component we could do is we could set the color for like an outside fill on your part too. So you can overlay these graphics on top of each other. So I'm going to set a color of black. I'm going to change the paintbrush to black. And I'm going to also overlay a black circle on top of this. So remember, just like paper, if I want the first fill oval to be black or to be a color, I've got to set that pen or that paintbrush first, and then I can draw the oval. Then if I want to paint an outside circle around that oval, I have to set the color to black. I don't want to use a fill oval because I don't want to fill it over with black, but instead I just want to draw, and that will do an outside component. So think about layering these items. There is a video in week 14 that demonstrates creating a calculator and overlaying the two components, two rectangles on top of each other so that it looks like they're filling in. And your book also shows you an example of creating a bar chart or a bar graph and sticking these components on here and adjusting as more get added. So let me show you that real quick. So right now, upon load, it is black, but you can see whenever you change the color, how that black outline sticks out there. So we'll change it again there. It's a little bit even easier to see. Now I can move and change the color, and because I've used the same size as my original oval, I've just used a draw instead of a fill. It looks like that black circle stays around there, that outline stays around that image. So that's how you can layer these components to get them to look differently, to get them to fill in. And I can change the color, move the circle, redraw the components, layer them, and then that special method called repaint, which allows whatever changes that you've created or made to the object to be redrawn. So whatever's inside this repaint method, after you've made the changes, it will set those new values in here, and it will draw the components or draw the graphic. So those are the main important components whenever you're working with your graphics. Need to extend JComponent, have this public void paint component method that inputs from the a graphics parameter. That graphics parameter will import from the AWT graphics class for use. And then over here, whenever you add the components to the panel itself, whenever you're adding a JComponent, you have to make sure that you set a preferred size. Want to make sure that it's probably a little bit smaller than your JFrame that you initially created. Finally, you can add that component wherever you want. If I added it at the end, you can guess where it's going to put it, right? Or put it underneath all the components, all the buttons, I should say. It's going to put the graphic there, it is underneath, but it'll still operate just the same. There we go. And whenever you want to make changes in your action listener, that is where you will call your method to make the changes. Now, it is very possible that you will have to grab some sort of information from your text boxes and pass it over to it. But you know how to pass things between methods. We use parameters. So if I had a method in the circle drawing class that said, let's call it change outside circle color, and it takes in a color of I think dark blue is one. There we go. Dark blue. Now, I don't have that method inside of my circle drawing class yet, so I need to create it. Change my parameter just a little bit. But maybe I use this color to adjust the color for the set. So instead of calling it black right away, I'm going to create a new one and call it border color. And I'll initialize that to black. And then inside of my paint, or excuse me, instead of where I set my color, I'll use that new border color that I created. And then inside of this class, I'll set the border color to be whatever color I pass over. And then, of course, paint. So I don't know if you'll be able to see this that well because I picked colors that are kind of the same. Let me try it with yellow. It's using the wrong color object, so that's why I was reading that for a second, because it's saying that there's still an issue with this. Yes, I have the wrong color imported. Let's try that again. Should import from the AWT. There we go. Yellow will be easier to see. Okay, sorry about that little detour. All right, so now when I hit move the circle, yeah, it does have that. Let me see if you can see it. Can you see that yellow around it? It's really hard to see. There, a little bit. But that's how you can pass values over between the two classes, just by using parameters. So you grab the value that you want to, or the value out of the box, out of the text box, and pass that over as well. With that, I believe that you have the components plus chat plus week 14 that you'll need to get your project started and to be successful in completing it. So next week's session will just be a help session. As soon as you open up, or excuse me, as soon as you complete week 14, those final projects will open and you can get started on those. And then that'll be the final component on those. It should go without saying that everybody's project will be unique. There shouldn't be nothing that's alike in that regard. So everybody's implementation will be different. You shouldn't work with anybody else because this is your final project as you complete it. And if you need any assistance, you should reach out to me rather than your classmates in completing these projects. Do take a look at your textbook in the sections that I was showing you. There's a lot of good examples of working with that graphics class so that you can become more familiar with it and understanding that invisible canvas of where it draws the components on there. That'll be really helpful in completing your final projects as well.